week 16 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few tight ends I have as sleepers this week. The first guy, Juwan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints. It surprised me Juwan Johnson didn't get picked up in more fantasy leagues. Available right now in 70% of fantasy leagues after coming off a big ball game in week 15 versus the Falcons. So the last few games here for him, week 10 at the Steelers, 5 catches, 44 yards, a touchdown. Week 11 versus the Rams, 3 catches, 47 yards, a touchdown. Weeks 12 and 13, he missed, and then he came back week 15 after the bye. 4 catches, 67 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So right here, it's been a great season in terms of finding the end zone here for Juwan Johnson with 7 touchdowns. And him and Andy Dalton have a good rapport. I've mentioned this in other videos this week. He's a former wide receiver that's obviously transitioned to tight end, and he's making the most of it. So this week here at the Cleveland Browns, I think he could put up a decent ball game as Juwan Johnson. And I actually had him ranked 11 in my top 12 this week at the tight end position, but under-owned in a lot of leagues. He's definitely a sleeper this week. The next tight end I have is a sleeper this week. Here is Noah Fant of the Seattle Seahawks. I know Fant's banged up. He possibly might not play in this ball game, and he's questionable. And he did return to practice, so he most likely will play. And Noah Fant's going to get more targets now, in my opinion, especially with Tyler Lockett out in this ball game. So right now, the last few weeks for Fant, week 12 versus the Raiders, 3 catches, 34 yards. Week 13 at the Rams, 4 catches, 42 yards, found the end zone. Week 14 versus the Panthers, 1 target, no catches, goose egg. And then week 15 versus San Francisco, 5 catches, 32 yards, and a touchdown. So this week here, week 16 at Kansas City, a game where they could be chasing points early and often in the Seattle team. I think Noah Fant could go out there and have a decent ball game and possibly find the end zone once again. And he's available right now in 77% of fantasy leagues. And the third and final tight end I have as a sleeper this week here is Brock Wright of the Detroit Lions. So Brock Wright last week had a 51-yard touchdown that won the game eventually for the Detroit Lions in the fourth quarter. And he's been the fill-in for TJ Hawkinson. I know the games really haven't been there, but he is a starter, and this is a sleeper for the deepest of leagues, available in 100% of leagues. So the last few games for Wright, week 13 versus the Jaguars, 2 catches, 25 yards. Week 14 versus Minnesota, 1 target, a goose egg. And week 15 at the Jets, like I mentioned, the catch for 51 yards and a touchdown. So this week here, week 16 at Carolina, a mediocre matchup. Not the greatest of matchups, obviously, but if you're in the deepest of leagues and in a big pinch at the tight end position, I think Brock Wright maybe could get lucky in this one and possibly find the end zone with a few yards. So that's a few tight ends I have as sleepers for week 16 of the fantasy football season.